Welcome to 2023. My name is Anders, and today we're going to be taking it real simple to start off the year, in that I'm just going to be building and painting a model I just really wanted to. Is it for an army I have? No. Is it one that I've had for a long time? Also no. So, whatever. This model is from a Kickstarter called Osmotic Meld, and it was sculpted by John Robertson based on the artwork of Ian Miller. The Kickstarter included a whole lot of really cool stuff, and I do have more that I will want to work on in the future, but this one in particular just really hit me. Basically, it's just a generic tree man a la Ents from Lord of the Rings, but there's something about the style and feeling of this model that really just hits for me. So, as soon as I got the box of models from the Kickstarter, I just had to jump right in. So first, I cut off the giant block sticking on the bottom of the figure. Honestly, this is huge and seems to be just made up of like old bits of sprue and stuff that was then cast in resin, so I really get this. Feels a little bit wasteful, but whatever. Then I ran my knife around the whole model, nicking off all of the excess bits of flashing and resin bits hanging off of the figure. Then, of course, because it is resin, I washed the whole thing with some soapy water before getting ready to go. While the bulk of the model is done in resin, the branches from the top of it are all done in metal, so I decided to pin these as that would definitely make the strongest bond. I started by using my pin vise, but this was just such a slow process. I don't know if I just blunted the bits through all my not so careful work with it, but I just lost patience here. So I actually stuck the whole thing into my drill, and that went a lot faster. Then I stuck a little bit of paperclip into those with some super glue, and we moved on to the model itself. Once again, I took out my drill and put some holes around the head to allow those branches to stick in, as well as some bigger holes in the arms to accept the larger pins that were already built into the model itself. I realized afterwards that maybe using an electric drill that was probably shooting off lots of little bits of resin from a foreign company I don't know all that much about might not have been the best idea, and I did spend the rest of the day really worried that I'd somehow poisoned myself with resin, but let's just forget about that for now. Now that I had all the holes done, I started assembling the figure, starting with the arms. These are all beautifully sculpted, but they did leave some pretty big gaps at their meeting points. So I went in with some sculpting, and honestly, with even just a bit of rudimentary work from myself, I managed to make a pretty seamless transition. Same goes for the branches, and this also ran into another issue for me, as there's no instructions with this, and there's no real obvious place each of the branches are supposed to go. Even looking online, I couldn't find much more than a pretty low resolution picture of the model, so I really had to kind of guess where to put all the branches and such. So I'm pretty happy with how they look in the end, but it definitely was a guessing game. Next, I took out a suitable base, basically the same size as the Ents models from Games Workshop, a 60mm base, and glued it right on with some super glue. I probably could have pinned this, but the model itself is actually pretty light considering most of it is just resin, so I wasn't really worried about it snapping off or anything. However, to make sure the bond was relatively strong and also to blend the inbuilt base of the model into the larger one I'd placed it on, I went around the edge of it with some excess green stuff and just blended it down into the, well, base. Then I grabbed some sticks and broke them into nice, decent sized pieces and just started gluing them down, as I wanted this to be a pretty thick, busy base, as if this guy is walking right out of some ancient forest. I even added some extra rocks to the base with some bits of cork and, well, real rocks, because rocks make the best rocks. Once that was all done, I applied some PVA glue around everywhere else on the base and then poured down some sand over top to blend the whole thing together. Then we get to painting, and I was actually pretty excited for this as I wanted to use a new toy I got. One of my Christmas gifts from my family was actually this, a airbrush. It's a pretty cool one too. It's got a pretty small compressor to it, and it's actually from a, well, construction tool company rather than an artist company. So I'm pretty interested to see how it is. However, I have no experience with any kind of airbrush, so my immediate comments are not going to be very useful. So I'm really just going to talk over what I'm doing here and maybe come back to this in a little while when I'm more comfortable with it and can give more opinions. For now, what I can say is that since I don't have a proper venting system or anything in my basement, I did opt to break out a mask and an air purifier so that I don't gas myself. However, again, the stuff we're using here is pretty innocuous, so I'm not terribly worried, but better safe than sorry. And while I get to base coating this, I wanted to touch base on a few other things, namely how 2022 went. At the beginning of 2022, I did a little wrap-up video where I talked about what I accomplished in 2021 and what I had planned for 2022, and honestly, I don't really want to do that again. One of the reasons is I don't actually think I accomplished much from that. I know I didn't hit my goal for numbers of models painted this year, and I definitely didn't hit my 10K subscriber goal. However, I did still paint over 150 models, and I hit 7,500 subscribers. And that's before you even consider the stuff I did accomplish, in that I did a lot of projects I'm incredibly proud of, and even did a pretty big collaboration, which was really exciting. Also, I recently heard a pretty wise man talking about how posting your goals actually makes you less likely to accomplish them. So for now, while I am going to set some personal little goals for myself, I'm not going to share them with you. And I'm simply going to let them unfold organically. Especially considering how complicated my life is right now, putting all that undue stress just seems like a bad idea. And so enough about me, as we've now finished base coating the model. And it looks pretty good. It's a pretty motley finish of gray and black, as I kind of mixed both some, well, gray and black paints to do it, but I like the effect. And the rest of the paint job is actually honestly really simple from here on out, and took me almost no time, but I'm pretty happy with it, so let's get on it. The first thing I did was apply a pretty medium level dry brush over the whole thing of a light gray that I mixed up from a, well, gray and a light bone color. This picked out all of the beautiful wood details really nicely, and I was honestly pretty happy with how it looked just here. But I wanted to bring in more of those details and also a bit more color to it. So the next thing I did was break out a green and apply that in a heavier dry brush to all of the leafy and mossy looking textures. Then for all of the bigger branches and vines, I took a khaki color and did a pretty heavy dry brush to differentiate them from the rest of the figure. I also applied this over top of a lot of the green sections to kind of pick out all the little twigs and stuff amongst the moss and leaves. There were also a lot of cracks around the model, and so for them I took off white and applied it pure right into those, as if it was looking into the lighter wood inside of all the bark. And since the base is basically built up of sticks and rocks, I basically applied those same dry brushes all over that as well in order to tie it in. Then I wanted to really depthen all of those details, and so I went straight for washes. I basically used 3 different washes here to create some different effects over the figure. The main one was just a pure brown wash, which was applied to all of the standard wood parts of the model, but for the branches, like I was talking about before, I used a bone colored one, which gave it a bit more of a warm sepia vibe and differentiated it again from the rest of the figure. Then I really wanted to deepen those green bits, and so I applied a dark green wash to those. Lastly, I took a black wash and applied that over all of the rocks on the base, while the wood was once again treated just like the rest of the model. Then it was back to dry brushing again, and I started off with a really light green in order to bring all those dark green sections back to life. I went pretty heavy here, and I'm actually really happy with the effect as it makes that all pop really nicely. Then to bring the whole model together, I once again took that off-white color from before and applied that lightly over the entire figure. The only other things I did were take a really dark brown wash and apply a few recessed shadings between the transitional sections like the beard and the body, as well as the eye sockets. Then I also painted the eyes by mixing a kind of pale orangey color from a few different paints to act as kind of an amber look to them, as if you were looking straight into the sap, and applying just a simple black pupil to the middle of them. Then once again, I took that same off-white color and added further refinement to all of the most extraneous bits. Then I took it once again and used a brush to just pick out all of the details specifically on the face, as I wanted that to obviously pop the most as it is the focus of the model. Then with the model basically done, it was on to finishing the base. So I took a really dark brown contrast and just filled in the rest of the base around all of the wood and rocks. As I said before, I want the base to look like a pretty dense old forest, and so I applied a whole bunch of different tufts onto it with some PVA before laying down some sieved out moss I got from the dollar store. This actually isn't exactly the one I've used on other models, as it's a little bit more brown, and at first I wasn't actually very happy with that, but once it was all down and dry, it gave a really nice effect, as it really looked like lots of little dead bits. Then all we had to do was just rim the base in black, and we were done. There we are, my first model of the year, and I'm honestly happier with this model than I have been with a lot of my recent stuff, and it took me almost no time. So what do you have planned for 2022? As I'm just ecstatic to have you all along with me, particularly all of my patrons. I know there are some new people to the channel since the Zorp Resort project, so to you, welcome. And to the rest of you, thanks for just being here. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for commenting, thanks for sharing, and just thank you. So then together, we are going to have an excellent 2023.